My name is Jill Lepore. I'm an American historian. But over the last few years, I've been troubled by some pretty big questions about the present. Why is it so hard for us to agree on what's true? So I started a podcast, The Last Archive, to find answers, to trace a history. Listen to The Last Archive on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Brought to you by ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Summer is finally here, and it's time to get out and enjoy the water, hike, bike, run, and to be back with friends. But life with the hassles of contacts and glasses slows you down. The Eye Center is giving you a summer of freedom thanks to Eye LASIK with iDesign 2.0 from Dr. Boutros. LASIK at the Eye Center is even more affordable with huge savings and 0% financing. Join the thousands of people with clear vision thanks to Dr. Boutros, one of the top surgeons in Virginia with 5 locations. Schedule your free LASIK consultation at theeyecenter.com today. Mattress Warehouse knows that buying a mattress can be tough. With so many choices, where do you start? Introducing Bed Match, a patented diagnostic system that determines your pressure points and recommends the mattresses that are best for your individual sleep needs. And it's found only at Mattress Warehouse. Come try Bed Match at a Mattress Warehouse near you. Visit sleephappens.com for locations and get free next day delivery on select purchases.
Mattress Warehouse, sleephappens.com.
It's a numbers game with your host, Gil Alexander.
It's one of those idiots who believe in analytics.
Hour number 2 of the numbers game at VEASAN, the sports betting network, VEASAN.com, the VEASAN app, Fubo, Sling, Game Plus, iHeartRadio, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Everybody taking us in this morning. We thank you. It is Gil Alexander, as the man mentioned, or as I mentioned. Jason Kahn, producer number 7, is here. I don't believe I ever had the chance to say hello to Jason Kahn, producer number 7. So hello, Jason Kahn.
Hello, Gil. Good morning.
You good?
I am very good.
Paul Sporer on DFS later. His baseball thoughts coming up. Pete Futak on the Big 12 in college football. We will do that momentarily. Also some thoughts on maybe some teams that aren't in the Power 5 that he think might make some noise this year. Maybe some thoughts on an FBS game early in the season. We'll see what Pete has to say. No line for this particular game, but just something to keep an eye out for. And I will talk about my segment that I did with Mike Palm yesterday on the Nuts about Survivor. I think this is worthwhile to talk about Survivor strategy. Let's do that later on the show. First, though, this from BetMGM, proud sponsors of this here program. These are just, in case you're interested in what people are betting over there at BetMGM. These are the most bet overs so far in the National Football League season win total market at BetMGM. The Lions over 5 games. That corroborates what Drew Dinsick was just talking about, how he actually thinks there might be some market overreaction to how bad the Lions are supposed to be. He says it might not be that bad. Lions over 5 is one of the most popular overs at BetMGM. So is the Broncos over at 8.5. That must have been Aaron Rodgers' speculation, right? Aaron Rodgers driven for a lot of the offseason. Eagles over 6.5. Could Deshaun Watson end up in Philly? Most bet unders. Steelers under 8.5. Jaguars under 6.5. Jets under 6. Those at BetMGM. And as far as the movement is concerned on those season wins, he also added, John Ewing over there at BetMGM, that the biggest movement, the Broncos opened at 7.5. Now they're 8.5, over juiced at minus 135. Chiefs opened 12. They're now 12.5. The under slightly juiced, though, at minus 125. And the Rams did go from 10 to 10.5, but the under is juiced at minus 125. Now, make or miss the playoffs over at BetMGM. These are the most popular bet for the make side, and this is ticket count now on the make. Broncos plus 130, woofed. The Washington football team plus 120, and the Lions at 7-1 to make the playoffs. BetMGM in Detroit, man, they're getting a lot of Lions action up there, aren't they? They love their Lions. That's me speculating, by the way. Might not just be in Detroit. Most bet teams to miss the playoffs, Colts minus 110. Carson Wentz injury might have had something to do with that. Again, we're not sure of the total arc. I think this is just from when these markets were open till present day. So this is the entire arc of the offseason. Colts minus 110, most bet teams to miss the playoffs. Cowboys plus 115. Saints minus 130 to miss the playoffs. So thank you to John Ewing at BetMGM. Oh, line movement on those as well. Broncos to make the playoffs, to make it. Open plus 275, now plus 130. Washington to make playoffs, open plus 185, now plus 120. And the Colts to miss, opened plus 165, now minus 110. Let's talk some Big 12 football. It's the last Power 5 conference to get to with college football news creator Pete Futak. You can follow him on Twitter at Pete, F-I-U-T-A-K, back in his backyard in the sunshine. How you doing, Peter? Peter, are you there?
Stopped raining around here. Am I crazy to kind of like the... Hello?
Yeah, we got you. Go ahead.
I'm here. I can hear you.
You can hear you now. Mm-hmm.
All right. I kind of like the Detroit Lions at plus 700. I mean, figure out who you're going to eliminate. The Bears probably aren't going to get to 500, and Vikings are flaky and weird right now. And if you're one Aaron Rodgers injury away, maybe you can Washington football team it up last year and win a division and somehow get in. So that's not crazy at plus 700 in your NFL, is it?
I'm not buying it, but I hear what you're saying. I mean, here's the thing, and I'm going to make this...
I like Jared Goff more than everybody else. I don't have the Jared Goff issue, so maybe that's...
Oh, maybe that's it. By the way, it is interesting with Jared Goff. I pointed this out on primetime last night. Jared Goff was a great downfield passer at Cal. And then his first year in the NFL, he was a pretty good downfield passer. And then all of a sudden, nothing. Right? Like, I don't know if it was his confidence, Sean McVay's confidence in him. It just kind of went away. So, I mean, there was a time where Jared Goff could do better things. But I do want to seize on this one point. I was going to make this later when I talk about Survivor. But we're all talking about the NFL as we are talking about college football, you and I. But in the NFL in particular, like this is our best, most educated thoughts about these teams. None of us really know, though, right? Like what we think we know now, 2 weeks into the season, let alone 5 weeks, there are going to be teams that are going to be completely different and performing completely differently than we thought. By the way, Gil Alexander, Pete Futak joining me to discuss college football, but we're talking a little NFL right here on a numbers game at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network, VSiN.com, the VSiN app, Fubo, Sling, Game Plus. So I do think like we should remind ourselves of that, right? Which is, and I'm going to make a point about this in Survivor coming up, but it's we got to fill time. We got to talk about these teams. We're going to preview it. But, man, we know how this goes. Once the season starts, you aren't going to be right about all 32 teams. So whether it's the Lions that will surprise us or not is a different story. But somebody will, for sure, in both directions, good and bad.
Absolutely. And I got to imagine Survivor Pool takes on a different tack this year because you have the extra game. I mean, if you're really thinking like you could win this, you got to plan this out a little bit usual, but you're right. You never know. You're always one quarterback injury away from being out. So it's why NFL world, I'm always kind of a bigger fan of the unders on win totals, just because, again, you lose a Dak Prescott or you lose a quarterback, all of a sudden you're going under. So the chance, that's a pretty solid chance to take, even though nobody wants to see any quarterbacks get hurt or anything.
It's been a hallmark of a numbers game for years. I love betting against human achievement. That's my thing. Unders in soccer games, unders in all kinds of things, unders on season win totals. It's phenomenal to bet against human achievement. Better than betting, our brains are wired for overs and that kind of thing. And in betting, you probably are better off trying to rewire your thoughts on that and maybe bet more of the undersides. Let's talk Big 12. This is the first conference I think we've gotten to where there aren't divisions, right? It's just straightforward, 10 teams in the Big 12. Funny how that works. Soon to be, we were joking, soon to be 8, soon to be the Big 2. Who knows at some point. Oklahoma, though, at the top, as they are perennially, with apologies to the Texas Longhorns. But Oklahoma has been at the top for years and years. Their season win total is 11. You look down their schedule, and you look at it, and you're like, well, I mean, where's the loss? I'm sure we can find one, because it's always tough to go over on 11. But really, I mean, this schedule is not the worst thing in the world for him, is it?
No, and then first of all, no apologies to Texas. I mean, the fun stat in Texas was when's the last time Texas won a Big 12 championship? Yeah. I mean, you have to go back a gajillion years. I think it's 2009. I mean, Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor. It seems like everyone else has won one. So, but you're right in Oklahoma. We talked about this yesterday with Clemson, where if it's an 11.5 win total line, go under, because it's always asking way too much of any team, no matter what, to go undefeated. There's always one bad day. Like we said before, one injury, always bet against human achievement. There's always one thing that can go wrong to screw up your 12-0. So it's better to go under on 11.5. 11 on Oklahoma is probably about right. And so there's going to be a loss somewhere. There's going to be a misfire. It's too decent a Big 12 for them to get through this thing unscathed. But it's it's hard to find, like you said, where is it? I mean, they could certainly lose to Texas. They could certainly lose, on the road to an Oklahoma State, which I think they could at the end of the rainbow. It's always kind of quirky. Iowa State's pretty good. And that's kind of the theme of the Big 12 this year is that, all right, take away Kansas, and then one other team out there is going to be bad. So you're only on like 8 teams. But those other 8 teams, maybe even 9, are all better. I mean, Baylor's better. Texas Tech gets just about everyone back in a super senior year. And on and on and on. Long-winded way of saying 11's probably about right. If you're going to go one way or the other, you probably go under on that Oklahoma 11.
Probably under or over? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah, I would probably say under. I mean, just as again, because if you're going to go over, you're asking for. If you're going to bet this, you're asking to go 12-0, and that's just asking for too much. It's almost better to assume that they're going to lose one along the way.
Yeah.
So at the very. So I would actually go under because again, I'm never a fan of asking anybody to go undefeated.
It is a funny number because it does feel like it's an over or push, but the over is only a 12-0, so it's probably
Yep.
what it probably is a non-bet. To win the conference -175, is that a bet? Or, as we see on this board here, the next closest team are the Iowa State Cyclones. They're 9.5 in the season wins market. They're plus 275 to win the Big 12. And you feel that the hype on the Cyclones is completely justified this year. Get a lot of guys back.
Yeah, it's justified, but 9.5 is actually kind of about right. That's about where it should be. I actually like the -175 on Oklahoma. That's not bad. I mean, compared to what we were talking about yesterday with, say, Clemson, where it was something just insane where you don't even mess with it. Like Iowa State's good, but again, as we've talked about before, with, for example, the idea of who's the betting to win the conference. Throwing out an outlier like Penn State or an NC State, okay, maybe to get there is not insane, but then you got to win it. So Iowa State has never won a conference championship in the history of the program. So I'm not going to get there now and say it's going to quite happen against this Oklahoma team, which might be under Lincoln Riley.
We look at the Oklahoma schedule. Oklahoma only leaves Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma, once after October 23rd, right? So that's the last 4 games, from that point of the season through an open date. It's just really favorable schedule, even from a travel standpoint. Texas, the aforementioned Longhorns, the post-Sam Ehlinger era. I'm looking at Oklahoma and Iowa State. Both of those games are away from Austin. That's not fun for them. Where do you stand on the Longhorns? Season win total 8, 9-1 to win the conference. Any shot there?
No, absolutely. They weren't bad last year. And this gets lost in the firing of Tom Herman, is that they were really, really close to doing really big things. I mean, they battled with Oklahoma. They're but a misfire late against Iowa State and a late field goal. They beat the Cyclones. They were very close to being in the Big 12 championship game last year. And this team coming back is better. You got to figure a more high-octane offense with Steve Sarkisian as the head coach. So that is not a crazy call at plus 900. And just get there. I'm sorry, again, my screen got fuzzy on me. That's not a crazy call because they could at least get to the Big 12 championship. And sure, they're going to have.
Let's, Jason, Pete, I'll tell you what, your audio is just, it's janky enough that we got to bail on it. Can we'll try to reconnect you. We'll pause, we'll hang up, and we'll try to reconnect with Pete Futak. We tried to power through it, but the audio is a little too messed up there. But it sounded like with Texas, he thinks there's a possibility of a 9-1, but we'll get a clarification on that with him. But it is Oklahoma's conference to win. Iowa State, Pete does believe, but he thinks the season win total of 9.5 is right where it ought to be with that. And we'll get to Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia on down the line, all the way down to Kansas, who, if I may just for a moment, Kansas with a season win total of 1.5. Season win total of 1.5. Backfield, good enough to carry things, I suppose, from time to time for the Jayhawks. Under the radar secondary could be enough to get this team to 2 wins. But the schedule's kind of tough when you look at Kansas' schedule at the bottom there because, where are the 2 wins? Arkansas State week 1, there's your win. But then the Big 12 schedule after an open date. By the way, they have 2 open dates: September 19th, October 17th. Who are the home games for Kansas to get that second win? Texas Tech? No. Pardon me. I was looking at the wrong team entirely there. Part of a misschedule here. I was talking about Kansas, but I actually was talking about Kansas State in that case with a 5.5. But the Kansas at 1.5. You look, where are the two wins? South Dakota at Coastal Carolina at the top. At Coastal Carolina is no gimme anymore in this day and age. So it's South Dakota at the top. Where's the other win? Pardon me, for Kansas. Lance Leopold from Buffalo, terrific coach. But boy, oh boy, it's going to take a total overhaul. But can they win a second game? I don't know. Normally, the non-conference schedule of South Dakota and then out Coastal Carolina I was pointing at. Now, Duke would be relative breeze, but obviously, if you go 2-1 in that group of 3, you've accomplished something. Pete Futak back from College Football News in his backyard. I took it down to Kansas at the bottom there, Pete, just to see if we could get to 2 games with Kansas. And I think I seized on the part of the schedule that it's like in previous years you might look at Coastal Carolina and Duke and say, "Oh, those are wins." But I don't know. I see a win at home against South Dakota for the Jayhawks, and then I'm not sure if they win another one to get to the 1.5.
That's asking a lot. I think in the same way that I don't like asking anybody to go undefeated, asking someone to only win 1 game, and even though South Dakota, that's not an absolute layup for them either. This is a true rebuilding program. Lance Leopold is a fantastic head coach, but there is so much work to do with this thing, and the rest of the Big 12 is so strong. But you got to. I kind of like. As you despise human achievement and with all the we us as a mankind can do with like the Detroit Lions, etc. I actually believe that these college kids will find out 1 game somewhere on here where all of a sudden a Kansas State just doesn't show up, or a Texas Tech just forgets how to play football, or something weird and quirky happens. Give me the 2 in Kansas this year. Give
me the 2. All right, they'll figure out a second win somewhere on the schedule. All right, we got lost on you on Texas. Were you saying the 9-1 to win the conference was worth a shot or no?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how much you got me. I apologize for my connection on my end. It was, but they weren't bad last year. I mean, they were really close. I mean, there but for a field goal, they had Iowa State in trouble. They gave Oklahoma a push. They were strong. So they're not that bad. They're going to have the firepower. They're going to have a better offense under Steve Sarkisian. And you've got the thing where the nobody believes in you limbo factor, where everyone's just going to wait for them to go off to the SEC. And this is kind of a redshirt year in just about every way possible. So it's not crazy that they can at least get to the Big 12 championship. And, yeah, maybe take a puncher's chance from then on.
All right, let's talk about the middle of the conference, as we talked about Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Texas, and also Kansas at the bottom. But from the Cowboys of Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, Kansas State, Baylor, Texas Tech, when you look at all of those season wins, which range from 7.5 down to 5, where's the bet in there? Is it a conference play? Is it a season wins play? Which is the most juicy to you from a betting standpoint?
Yeah, forgive me for not, because I can't see it on the screen at the moment. What's the who had the 5 of that group that you just mentioned?
Texas Tech, which to me that's the over, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure. I love this team. Again, we've been talking all offseason through all these previews about the super senior year, where you do have team after team after team, which has 20 starters back and 23-year-old grown-ass men who don't want to go to the real world yet and are going to, on the right day, just give everybody a tough out. Throw into the fact Tyler Shugg, the Oregon transfer, who's got all the tools and all the talent to rise up and be this year's kind of somewhat out of nowhere guy who becomes number 1 overall draft pick quarterback. He's got all the tools. He's got the coaching staff that's going to help him. He might be just that missing piece for a team that you said, like, for 5 wins, I think that's a layup for this team, especially when you're talking about, I think they're going to beat Houston to start the season. They're definitely going to beat Stephen F. Austin. They're definitely going to beat Florida International, and they're definitely going to beat Kansas. So you're talking about a nice base of at least 3 wins, probably 4, and all you need is 5 just to push, and they're going to get to about 7.
Yeah. On the flip side, there are 5 Big 12 road games, including Oklahoma and Texas. But Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and TCU do come to Lubbock, so that is a good thing to try to get them past the 5 wins. This is from College Football Betting Guide at VSiN, the 2021 College Football Betting Guide. These are the Big 12 games of the year, and these were done by the great Bruce Marshall, I believe. He tackled the Big 12 in our College Football Betting Guide, and I'm curious if there's a specific game line that you feel is exploitable here on these Big 12 games of the year per the College Football Betting Guide, which again is available at vsin.com/subscribe. That's vsin.com/subscribe. If we could flash those up on the screen, these would be the games. Again, everybody who did such a great job on this went conference by conference. So September 11th, there's a couple of these. Iowa at Iowa State, always a fun one. Cyclones favored by 6.5. Also September 11th. Texas on the road at SEC. Arkansas, Texas favored by 4.5. Nebraska's at Oklahoma. Oklahoma giving 19.5 in what used to be, the greatest rivalry, one of the great rivalries, along with Ohio State, Michigan, and Auburn, Alabama, back in the day in college football. October 2nd, Oklahoma at Kansas State. That's off the board. But October 9th, Oklahoma's giving 10 versus Texas at the neutral site of Dallas, neutral in quotes. Iowa State at Oklahoma on November 20th, also on there, with Oklahoma giving 9.5. Any of those jump off the page for you?
Texas. If you're even in weird years where Texas was awful, they always at least hung around. And, maybe they would lose 67-60 or something, but they always seem to have the offense that could keep up. I know Oklahoma's defense is the best in the Big 12, and this is Lincoln Riley's best team. But if you're giving me 10 in that rivalry, where that really does kind of defy logic and reason more often than not, I am going with that. And while I'm not the hugest of Iowa State fans overall compared to where they're going to be ranked to start the season, that's a lot of points to be given away right now. We talked about before, you never, ever, ever want to think about injuries, and it's not nice, and it's kind of gross. But Oklahoma is a Spencer Rattler injury away from the machines maybe not exploding like it should. So if Iowa State does get everyone back, I like the Cyclones if you're giving me close to 10 in that as well.
Okay. And what would be number 2 on? What would be the next one on there? Is there anything else, or everything else looks about right?
I think Texas is the one that I like the best out of those two. What did you read off? Forgive me. I didn't mean Oklahoma, Nebraska, real quick. What was it?
Oklahoma, Nebraska was Oklahoma giving 19.5.
Yeah, take that. They're going to destroy Nebraska. Take Oklahoma.
So lay the 19.5. From Pete Futak. We'll come back just 5 more minutes with Pete. Now that we've got the audio corrected, I want to talk about any other teams in college football, non-Power 5, that you think are vastly under or overrated. And then the notion of FCS schools versus FBS. We don't really have lines for those early, but what might be a live FCS team in one of those early season games? We'll come back. Pete Futak, college football news, and then Survivor Talk right here on A Numbers Game at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
It's crazy how much we have to pay for outdated, impersonal healthcare, and even crazier that we all just accept it. It's time to face facts. Healthcare is backwards. Luckily, there's Forward, a new approach to primary care that's surprisingly personal and refreshingly straightforward. Forward never makes you feel like just another patient. Backed by top-rated doctors and the latest tech, Forward gives you access to personalized care whenever you need it. Using in-depth genetic analysis and real-time blood work, Forward's top-rated doctors provide you with in-depth insights to better understand your genetics, mental, and physical health. They then create custom, easy-to-understand plans to help guide you to achieving long-term health. With Forward, you get unlimited in-person visits with your doctor and access to care anytime via the Forward app, all for one flat monthly fee. It's time to stop accepting backwards healthcare and start moving your health forward. Visit GoForward.com today to learn more. That's GoForward.com.
After all that planning, it's happening. Your DIY closet renovation is finally becoming a reality. Question is, where do you put your things while you work? CubeSmart has you covered with month-to-month leases and self-storage solutions that make it easier to get organized. Online or in person, getting self-storage is convenient and fast. And because DIY renovations can easily go over budget, it's great that CubeSmart is offering up to 25% off your monthly rent. Say goodbye to before and hello to after with CubeSmart Self-Storage. Visit CubeSmart.com for more details.
Are you expecting a child tax credit? Deposit and spend it securely with the BB&T Money Account prepaid card. It makes managing your everyday spending easy. Apply for a prepaid card at bbnt.com/moneyaccount.
Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Gil Alexander.
Back on A Numbers Game, Gil Alexander, as the man said. Pete Futak from College Football News, kind enough to stick with us for 5 more minutes. All right, Pete, we've done all the Power 5 conferences. Obviously, with apologies to conferences like the AAC, Conference USA, the MAC, the Mountain West, the Sun Belt. Maybe not full conference previews on those, but I'm curious, is there a team or teams that you feel, based on sort of the conventional wisdom on them, that you feel is vastly overrated headed into this season, maybe vastly underrated?
I kind of think that Cincinnati's going to be overrated just overall. You forget that last year they played a full schedule of non-Power 5 teams right up until the very end where they gave Georgia a hard time. So I don't think they're going to get by both Indiana and Notre Dame, which is what you're going to have to do to even think about being in the college football playoff discussion. So I kind of think they're just a little bit overrated in all this. The team that I do like and I think is going to be very, very dangerous, watch out for UCF. I know their schedule is tough. They got to go to Cincinnati, but Gus Malzahn is a great head coach and a great get for the program. Last year, UCF, that was one of the teams that was hit hardest by various opt-outs and other issues. And this time around, I think they're going to be very, very dangerous, and that could be the team that I do think is going to end up getting the Group of 5 nod. The other thing to get a little obscure here, I do like the idea of good coaches going to places like Arkansas State. Butch Jones is a weird dude, but he can coach, and that Arkansas State team is going to bounce back fast. And so while everyone's going to be talking about Coastal Carolina and Louisiana and Appalachian State in the Sun Belt, Arkansas State's going to have an offense. That's going to be a very, very dangerous team to look at from the Sun Belt.
Back to UCF for a second, too. We're going to learn a lot about that program early. Boise State at home, September 4th, at Louisville, September 17th, with the Bethune-Cookman game wedged in between there. So we'll learn a lot about UCF, the Knights, at that point very early in the season. Wanted to ask you here in the last couple minutes, there's obviously some FBS, FCS games here towards, largely towards the beginning of the season. And we don't have lines for any of them yet, but there will be spots where these are bettable. And I'm curious, because you rank all 130 FBS teams 1 to 130, and there's obviously FCS rankings out there. There's going to be opportunities where the FCS team might be live. And the reason this comes up is we actually have multiple screens in here, and they're showing the Sam Houston State game from last year in the playoffs. And I'm just curious, is there a specific matchup early in the season? I mean, Eastern Washington, UNLV, I'm looking at here on September 2nd. There's a bunch on September 2nd. September 4th, there's one that's close to my heart. Monmouth taking on Middle Tennessee State. I couldn't help but notice you have Middle Tennessee State ranked about 118th. Monmouth right around a top 10 FCS school. And again, we don't have a line on this, but I just want to file this away. Is that a matchup that could be live for the FCS school?
Absolutely, because forget about the Power 5 games against FCSers. If anything weird happens there, it's a total outlier. But Middle Tennessee is very gettable. That is not a crazy early thought. To your point, you want to find the FCS programs, and not only is it good FCS programs, but remember they played this spring, or at least a bunch of them played this spring. So they had like pretty much a really strong full-on preseason that a lot of these other programs have, and so they're going to be a lot sharper than some of these FBS teams are going to be to start the season. So if you're a South Dakota State and you had a team that was national championship level good throughout the year, at Colorado State's not going to be a bad play considering where the line might be for that. UAB is going to be terrific. This might be the best UAB yet under Bill Clark, UAB team under Bill Clark, but Jacksonville State's very good. So that's one of those weird Wednesday night games that all of a sudden the Gamecocks could make this very interesting.
Yeah, that's the first FBS FCS game of the year. Jacksonville State versus UAB in Montgomery, Alabama on Wednesday, September 1st. We have 45 seconds, Pete. Plug college football news for folks. What can they find on your site?
It's on. As you mentioned yesterday when I couldn't do the math, we're now just over 2 weeks away from this thing getting started. So going forward, it's all previews and predictions from there. I am going to hit up a Gil Alexander within the next 24 hours for all the expert picks that we're going to do again. And right now it's just all the team previews for everybody this year.
Okay. collegefootballnews.com, a trove of college football information. You can follow Pete at Pete, F-I-U-T-A-K, Pete Futak on Twitter. Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it, man.
There you go.
Pete Futak, stalwart, going through all the Power 5 conferences with us the last couple of weeks. We'll come back. Mike Palm was kind enough to have me on the nuts yesterday to talk survivor strategy. I want to repeat some of that stuff because everybody's looking forward to signing up for Circa and maybe your local survivor pool. Got some strategy, some thoughts next. And then Paul Sporer on baseball. It's a numbers game at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Gil Alexander.
The VSiN College Football Betting Guide is here. Start your football season on the right foot with our expert analysis and picks for conference champions, Heisman hopefuls, and playoff teams, plus power ratings for every team. Now's also a great time to get your all-access VSiN subscription, including our college and pro football betting guides, along with everything we offer for the entire football season. Get your college betting guide for only $19.99, or start your free all-access trial today at VSiN.com/subscribe. Look at that thing. That guide is awesome. Again, shout out to Matt Ewins and crew for doing such a great job on that. And we went through all the college football games of the year per conference. Bruce Marshall was in there. Wes Reynolds was in there. Ewins himself was in there. Forgive me for anybody I'm leaving out, but they just did such a fabulous job with that. Power ratings for every team. Again, VSiN.com/subscribe. And the Pro Football Betting Guide on its heels here at VSiN with all the expert picks there. All right, Mike Palm was kind enough to have me on The Nuts. That's with a Z. First of all, it's every day here on the network, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. He was kind enough to have me on yesterday to talk survivor strategy. I come to you as someone who got all the way famously to week 15 last year. Oh, December 20th. Who could forget Jared Goff and the Rams going into New York to play the Jets and laying an egg and crushing so many of us who were still alive in Circus Survivor last year. But it was one of those things where also, like, remember we had Professor Ed Myers on the show last year because he had done this power ranking. Thank you, Destiny's Child. He had done this power ranking of the remaining entrants left in Circus Survivor because it was down to, a manageable amount. I think there was like 50 or so at that point, 50 entrants left. I was power ranked third with who I had remaining. Third. Thank you, Jared Goff. I'll never forget. Anyway, this year it's going to be, again, we'll do it through the prism of Circus Survivor, but obviously you have survivor pools that you might do amongst your friends or in your area, and these all apply, I think, just sort of macro level things about survivor strategy, which is one, I start with the game is misnamed, right? I don't know what it should be called. But because it's called Survivor, your brain immediately goes to the object is to survive. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to win. So let me caveat that for a second. I'm not saying you should go kamikaze week one. What I'm saying is there is some sort of hybrid of these two things where I think the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, you do try to survive in advance. Because I'll get back to something I said with Pete Futak. We can sit here and pontificate about all 32 NFL teams till we're blue in the face, but none of us really know exactly the skill level or the performance level of these teams here in August. We'll find out as the season progresses. We won't know anything before the season, or we'll have our best guess before the season, but we won't really know anything, even 2 weeks in. we still won't kind of know. 5-6 weeks in, maybe we'll start to have some sort of grasp, a better grasp anyway, of these 32 NFL football teams. And obviously there's some teams that are going to evolve from that point. But at least 5 or 6 weeks under our belt, I do think you try to survive in advance. And first of all, in a contest like Circa, multiple entries, they allow up to 6 per person now. I think if you're only getting 1 or 2 entries now, you're toast right off the bat. Like, you can't compete. I had 2 last year. 2 in the inaugural Circa Survivor. I lost my first one week 1 and had that second one go all the way to week 15. There's no chance I'm only having 2 this year because it's just not, you can't get it done with, I think, what's going to end up being, even though they're trending, low right now with Survivor entries. I think they're about 10% towards their goal of 6,000 where there won't be an overlay. I think they'll get pretty darn close, if not over that, when all is said and done. Derek and Mike with their P.T. Barnum stuff, they'll get there. But anyway, I think you need multiple entries. But that's the main thing I want to convey. Famously, some people say they put their map together, they put their grid together for all, remember, 17 games. But there's also, in the Survivor case, Christmas is its own week this year, along with Thanksgiving being its own day. So it's going to be 20 total. Is it 20 or 19? Total weeks, it's 20, I believe, in the National Football League this year in Circa Survivor. So, or 19, forgive me, I'll have to check. But it's going to be really, really difficult to get through it all, especially with that Christmas and Thanksgiving quirk. But I think the notion that you would map it all out from before the season starts is sort of a fool's errand because we don't know the teams. Survive in advance for 5 or 6 weeks. Don't get too cute. And then at the 6 or 7 week mark, then once you've gotten through that with however many entries you have left, because there's going to be sometimes you strategize and you do what Derek Stevens calls the double option. Maybe Jacksonville, Houston, week 1 is a double option situation where you sacrifice one of your multiple entries. But I think at the 6-7 week mark, then you map it out the rest of the way. Don't do that before the season when you truly don't have a grasp. That's the first thing. There's also, the other things that you have to know. You have to know the size of your pool, whether it's Circa, whether it's your own local pool. Obviously, that always matters, size of pool. Generally speaking, the smaller the pool, the more conservative you can be. The wider the pool, at some point you have to apply game theory. So after that survive in advanced stage, you got to think about winning, not surviving. You got to think about, just to use a bizarro example, if there's 100 people left in the pool and it's a Cowboys-Washington game and the Cowboys are favored by 7, and you could check like a ESPN.com or an OfficeTournamentPools.com to see what general percentages of Survivor picks are. And if you see that 99% of the people on the Cowboys are on the Cowboys that week, you should be taking Washington to win. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but you get the idea. You have to have a sense of what other people are going to play week after week, and then think about playing the other side of that. Obviously, if there's a team like the Jets last year, maybe it's the Houston Texans, maybe it's not. There might be a quirk to it where there's a team that you can pick on weekly, week after week. We don't know that's going to be the case, but obviously that would sort of factor into your thinking. I will allow that for sure, because I certainly did it against the Jets last year. But just keep all of that in mind. There's also some myths. Don't play division games. To be honest with you, if you go all the way back to 2002 and you look at databases, that's a complete myth when it comes to avoiding division games because, based on the belief that upsets are more likely when 2 division rivals get together. But while that sounds good, no evidence to support that. If you take division games favored, where one team is favored by 5 or more points, which is generally the pool that you would select Survivor picks from, division favorites have actually won a higher percentage than non-division favorites in those matchups. Now, that's not to say that road favorites do lose more than home favorites, but I wouldn't necessarily do the division game myth that a lot of people do when they factor into their thinking. So all of that is important. Also know that, an option that is just a few percentage points lower in win probability in any given week, but is far less popular. I mean, that's the thing you should think about. That can often be a great pick. It's all of these things in one. There is an extra layer of COVID, obviously, that you have to consider. That came up last year several times. And more than anything, know your pool rules. Know your specific pool rules. Obviously, in Circa, you have to know that you have to save teams for Thanksgiving and for Christmas and beyond. So there's a lot that go into the mix. It's why Survivor is so cool. If you don't feel up to the old contest where it's 5 picks against the spread weekly, Survivor could be an option for you, but keep all of those things in mind. Thank you to Michael Palm for having me on the show on the Nuts yesterday. We'll come back. Paul Sport, DFS plays in baseball today, and some other baseball thoughts. It's a numbers game at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
I'm Robert Evans. I'm a journalist, and I've been following collapse for a while. In 2011, I watched the largest wildfires in Texas history burn 3.9 million acres. A decade later, in the winter of 2021, I was in Dallas for a once-in-a-thousand-year snowstorm. And then a couple months later, I was in my new home, Portland, Oregon, for a once-in-a-thousand-year heat dome that left unprecedented temperatures killing dozens of people in the city. We keep having unprecedented events, and they keep provoking things to break down. Infrastructure, power lines, everything seems to be in a constant state of collapse, and that's pretty scary. But the good news is that collapse also means we have an opportunity to build something better. On my new show, It Could Happen Here, Monday through Friday, we'll talk about collapse, and we'll provide you with advice on how to build something new from the ashes of the old. Listen to It Could Happen Here, starting on August 16th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hola, I'm Wilmer Valderrama, and I'm so excited to share my new podcast with you. Each week on Essential Voices, I'll be in conversation with an essential worker. Truck drivers, teachers, mental health professionals, grocery store workers, folks who've kept society going during COVID and will keep it going long after. How can we continue supporting these folks and their society-sustaining professions as the nature of the pandemic continues shifting? After we hear their story, our team digs a little deeper through a roundtable discussion between thought leaders. We lay down some facts and learn more about what we as a community can be doing to support our essential voices. Listen to Essential Voices with me, Wilmer Valderrama, as part of the My Cultura podcast network, available on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Baratunde Thurston, host of Force Multiplier, a new podcast dropping August 12th. When I was a kid, my favorite cartoon was Voltron, Defenders of the Universe. I loved these individuals combining to form a much more powerful entity. This podcast kind of reminds me of Voltron. Force Multiplier is about leveling up the impact we can have on the world through our relationships. Whether we're talking about health inequity, nutrition insecurity, or racism, we're facing unprecedented challenges that require unprecedented collaboration across disciplines and sectors. Join me as I sit with leaders from across the public, private, and nonprofit worlds who are forging partnerships to take action on some of the toughest challenges facing us today. Maybe you'll even get inspired yourself. Welcome to Force Multiplier, an iHeartRadio original podcast with Salesforce.org. Let's change the world one relationship at a time. Listen to Force Multiplier on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Gil Alexander.
As summer heats up, so does the sports betting action at BetMGM. Sign up now using bonus code VSiN1000 and your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Place your bets on all the exciting showdowns in MLB, MLS, and more sports from around the globe. And when you register with BetMGM, you also get instant access to a variety of parlay selection features, live betting options, player props, daily boosted odds specials. It's all there. From goals to home runs, the king of sportsbooks takes every play to a new level of excitement. Simply download the BetMGM app today or go to BetMGM.com and enter bonus code VSiN100, VSiN1000, pardon me. Oh, I left out a zero. VSiN1000 to get back up to $1,000 on your very first wager. New customer offer, paid and free bets, eligibility restrictions apply. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Must be 21 years of age or older to wager. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Promotional offer not available in the state of Nevada. Jessica Pegula, Contivate on serve now in the first set, 5-5. Our pick of Pegula here early in a tight one, at least in the first set. Again, the big dog later today, a couple dogs, but the big one, Jill Teichman, $3 dog or $3 plus if you're lucky enough to get the number I did, closer to my number on her. Jill Teichman in her match later today versus Who's Teichmann playing again now? It escapes me who Teichmann is playing. Oh, she's playing Danielle Collins, of course, winner of 2 straight tournaments that she's been in. And then I'm going on a Grigor Dimitrov plus 116 against, once again, against Riley Opelka, who we had last night. And we're victorious in that match against Nick Kyrgios. Let's talk some baseball. Let's bring him in from Fangraphs, of course, the Sleeper in the Bus podcast, at Sporer, S-P-O-R-E-R on Twitter. And, of course, twitch.tv/Sporer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the great Paul Sporer. How you doing, Paulie?
Gil, I'm well. How are you?
I'm well. Let us begin with your DFS plays. Let's start there. Full slate of Major League Baseball. Where are you going?
A lot of ways to go. Yeah, like you mentioned, super full slate. Got some aces going, which you can dive into. But, I kind of like to play more in the middle. Nestor Cortez has come out of the bullpen for the Yankees. Has pitched really well. Gets the Royals here on the road. I think that's a good setup for him. Luis Patino is really starting to settle in as well. And both those guys are in the low 8,000s, 8,500 for Cortez, 8,300 for Patino. But I think they're pretty affordable right now because they're being trusted for 5+ as long as they handle it. I know Casey Mize doesn't get a ton of strikeouts. That's kind of built into his price, though, at 7,300 against the Orioles. I would even look at Zach Gallen. Yes, he's facing the Giants, but when he's on, he can be great. And he's only 7,100. So I like a lot of these mid-tier pitchers. Maybe even pair them up with one of the studs, like a Sean Manaea at 10,000, Max Scherzer at 11,000, although he will be in Philly. Team he's obviously very familiar with, having pitched in Washington. Then as far as the hitting goes, I think you start to pick on some of the guys that those guys are going against. Daniel Lynch has smoothed out a bit from the early start there, but I think the Yankees could be interesting against him. They are right-handed heavy against the lefty, and one of their big lefties, Rizzo, is out. Luke Voigt stepping up very nicely. I think J Happ, I would be interested as like a total off the board play, a Pittsburgh stack, just to really test the depths of J Happ's awfulness right now, because he's just he couldn't get me and you out, Gil. I hate to be too mean about it, but it's been rough. So I wonder if anybody's going to go out there and do that, at least as like a secondary play. I think that's something interesting there. And I think the Padres are going to get Braxton Garrett this time. I think he had double-digit strikeouts against them. Solid, interesting prospect, but not that great. I would go for a lot of Padres too.
All right, so yesterday on the show, Paul, and you weren't here, so I'll recap it because I know you're dying to know.
Absolutely.
I did a couple things over the weekend. Girlfriend's not in town, so I had all the time in the world on my hands, so I could actually do like baseball deep dive research projects. So one of them was, diving into the Dodgers' unbelievable extra inning stat. They're 1-12 in extra innings, including 11 straight losses in a row, and 14 consecutive frames where they have given up at least one run, which is just incredible. And by the way, there was one bunt in the entire history of it. One bunt. It was a Chris Taylor bunt at some point. He was out in a fielder's choice. They never tried it again. They never tried it before. So there's that little angle to it. But it didn't matter if it was Jansen or if it was Gratterall or Vicio or White. Pick your Trinan once with a wild pitch. It was just every reliever you could possibly throw out there had their moment where they were giving up runs in extra innings. And I guess the question to you is this. We all know how great the Dodgers are. First of all, was it malpractice for them not to get bullpen help at the trade deadline? And then whether it was or not, do you think that this is a, just a random negative variance, or do you think this is actually something that, we can expect to happen? Maybe not the streaks to continue, but really very often when it goes to extras with these guys.
I really think it's reliever volatility, and they're really catching the bad end of a streak. Somewhat on a par with the with the one-run record of the Mariners to the opposite side, where they're playing way over their heads, and we just find these different outliers in a given season. I would not put a whole lot of stock into it. Even though I don't love the Dodgers bullpen, I still would be reluctant to say that that's a thing I would key in on for my handicapping. As far as them getting some bullpen help, yeah, they certainly could have. Obviously, they paid the big fee for the Scherzer-Turner combo. And, of course, their thinking is that once they start to get healthy with Kershaw, Duffy, who they did acquire, basically as a bullpen piece, by the way. They're going to put him in the pen. And then Gonsolin, they're going to strengthen their bullpen via starters for October. Yeah, they could have maybe strengthened it for down the stretch here to maybe kind of push forward. I think they think that the horses that they have can overtake the Giants for the division, though. And then once you hit October, you're putting a couple guys in the bullpen. Maybe it's Price to go with Duffy. So that's a couple lefties to go with Jansen and Trinan. I know Jansen's been a little bit shaky, but they're still going to go to him. So I think that that's how they're going to improve their bullpen, is via the excess starters once we get to October, assuming they have that health, though, too, right? Because we don't have guarantees there on Duffy and Kershaw. It's an expectation. And if they don't come back, then they are in some trouble, because then when October hits, it does thin out a little bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if they put Julio Urias in the bullpen at that point to get multi-innings out of him the way they did last year. Yeah. It would be really interesting. That would only be if the injuries linger, though, to Duffy and Kershaw.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they got there last year. I mean, I can already see it, right? We all can. There's going to be a postseason game or two or three, right, where it's going to be Jansen and it's going to be a tight game, and everybody that's holding a Dodgers ticket is going to be like, why is this happening? Why couldn't they have addressed this? All right, we'll see. It is what it is. Again, 14.
I mean, you saw the price for Kimbrel, though, so yeah, to get somebody like that, they would have had to pony up another big fee.
But here's the betting truth serum again, and this is, again, I talked about it with, I talk about it with bunts, right? I sound like 1,000 years old in extra innings when talking about bunts, but it's like when the road team doesn't score, betting truth serum, if I'm on that team that didn't score, I totally don't want them bunting in the bottom half of the inning, right? So that tells me I know they should bunt. That's another story.
Correct.
What I wanted to say about the Kimbrel thing, though, this is also a betting truth serum from the betting market, is if the Dodgers had gotten Craig Kimbrel, and I think I brought this up with you before. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But if they had gotten Craig Kimbrel instead of Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, or one of those two guys, their betting lines in every game with that shored up back end, you could have counted the scenarios where they would have been south of a minus 200 favorite, right? Like any DeGrom game, if DeGrom were healthy, home or road, they would have been south of that. Like at Woodruff or at Burns or any at Milwaukee of their starters, right? At Zach Wheeler and the Phillies, maybe at Gausman. But what I'm saying is you could have literally counted the scenarios, and maybe it wasn't even two hands worth of when they would be south of a $2 favorite. That tells me, and I think, I might not be right about that, by the way, but I think that's the case. The fact that I'm even bringing it up tells me that that's the move they should have made.
I can totally understand that because of the impact it would have had on the day-to-day versus Scherzer only having that impact once every 5 days. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint the impact that Turner has on the betting line, right? Like when a team adds a hitter, I mean, there is an impact, certainly, but I think it's hard to isolate it as much as you probably could have with a high-impact reliever, because that is their number one, scary issue right now, right, is the back end of the bullpen. Nobody fully trusts Jansen, and, Trinan's very good, but they don't seem to want to just give him the closer's role over Jansen because he's such a quote-unquote capital C closer. So I understand that. That would have been interesting if they had done that instead of Scherzer Turner to really shore up the bullpen that way, because then they could have maybe done two deals. I mean, they did do the Duffy deal, so if they had done like Duffy and Kimbrel, what would their bullpen have looked like in October at that point? That would have been kind of insane.
Last thing was we only have 60 seconds. The other thing I did is I did a remaining strength of schedule analysis on all the contending teams. And what was clear was, even though Oakland's only 2 games behind the Astros in the West, that of all the contending teams remaining, the Astros have the easiest remaining schedule in the American League. The A's have the hardest. So it might not be as close as we think it is. And in the NL, the toughest by far was the Padres and the Mets, who are the teams that are really looking the worst right now in terms of their positioning. And the easiest, and this was the 29th easiest, and I mean the second easiest and the most easy of all 30 MLB teams, the Reds had Reds had the second easiest schedule, and the Phillies had the easiest. Now the Reds, the Reds can't lose a Castillo minus 180 game like they did last night. So you still got to perform. But I mean, doesn't that make you more bullish on the Reds getting past the Padres, the Phillies just running to the NL East? Obviously, the Braves are still there, so maybe not running. But the deck is stacked in those teams' favor, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely think you start to look at both of them more heavily. That was really frustrating. I'm a huge Castillo fan, so he'd really gotten on track. So that is rough. They can't lose games like that. But it does set up nicely, and that Mets schedule is brutal. And San Diego shares the same issues with facing San Francisco and LA a bunch in the near future.
Brutal. The Mets and the Padres, it's just going to be so tough, even if DeGrom does come back for the Mets. Paulie, always appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yo, great talking with you. Take care.
Paul Sporer at Sporer, Sporer on Twitter. All his stuff can be found there, including twitch.tv/Sporer. Gaming with Paul Sporer. Lombardi Line is next. Brady Cannon's your host right here at VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Randy, and this is Dave.
We're the founders of Bombas, the most comfortable socks in the history of feet.
So comfortable, we sold and donated millions of pairs.
To sell and donate a lot of socks, we became obsessed with comfort.
We reinvented the sock from the ground up, adding comfort innovations along the way.
It worked. People tried them, loved them, told their friends about them,
helping us sell and donate millions of pairs.
Try them now at bombas.com/comfy and get 20% off your first order. That's BOMBAS.com/comfy.
I'm Robert Evans, host of It Could Happen Here, a podcast about the possibility of a second American Civil War. Well, now I've written a novel, After the Revolution. It's set 50 years in the future, in a Texas racked by civil war. It follows 3 characters, a fixer named Manny leading reporters through the war zone, a young extremist named Sasha determined to join a militia called the Heavenly Kingdom, and an old veteran named Roland with a body full of U.S. Army cyberware and a head full of missing memories. Listen to After the Revolution on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. All chapters of After the Revolution are out now in audiobook form and on atrbook.com as an EPUB.
There's more to Isaac Newton than apples and gravity. On the podcast Newton's Law, you'll hear a different side of the father of physics, who later became England's most ruthless lawman.
So who was this ruthless detective? This hard-bitten crook catcher, totally unmoved by the pleas of a desperate man? It was Isaac Newton. Yes, that Isaac Newton.
Listen to Newton's Law starting August 18th on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.